she says, Paul, you're eating an apple. And I said, well, I'm hungry. I was on my way home. And she said, yeah, but this is your exit interview and you're eating an apple. I said, well, I'm hungry. She said, I think you're going to be okay, Paul.
Hey there, I'm Goli Kalkaran, and this is Lessons from a Quitter, where we believe that it's never too late to start over. No matter how much time or money you've spent getting to where you are, if ultimately you are not happy, then it's time to get out. If you're feeling stuck and you feel like there's gotta be more, there's gotta be a way to feel fulfilled and excited about what you do, then this is the podcast for you. Each week, I will sit down with an inspiring guest who quit their professional career in order to forge their own path and create a life that they love. Welcome to another episode of Lessons from a Quitter. You are in for a great one. I love stories like this because the point of this podcast is to push what we think is possible and these false, commonly held beliefs of what we are capable of. And I think Paul's story is perfect for that. Today on the show, we have Paul Tasner. Paul is now the co-founder and CEO of Pulp Works and more recently the co-founder of Sort. But what makes his story so special is that Paul spent 40 years in corporate America. He has held leadership positions in ventures ranging from the startup world to Fortune 100 companies. He has his PhD in mathematics, and he spent the majority of his life climbing that corporate ladder like a lot of us do. It was a layoff when he was 64 years old that sort of blindsided Paul and put him on a new path. And 8 years ago, when he was 66, Paul took a leap of faith and decided to challenge the traditional packaging industry. Appalled by the amount of plastic pollution on our planet and no longer content to accept the dangers of plastic packaging materials, he founded Pulp Works and set out to create safe, eco-friendly packaging for consumer products. Pulp Works and Paul have been the recipient of more than 20 awards and the subject of more than 75 stories in the media. And he was selected as a TED resident in 2017. His TED Talk on sustainability, entrepreneurism, and ageism has been seen more than 2 million times and translated into 29 languages. You really should watch his TED Talk. I will link to it in the show notes. It's spectacular. And in 2018, as if he wasn't doing enough, Paul and his colleagues from San Francisco and Mexico City founded Sort, a company using artificial intelligence, Internet of Things, and computer vision technology to solve the contamination challenges facing the plastics recycling industry today. He's doing such incredible things, and I think the biggest thing that he is doing is inspiring others to realize that it is never too late. You are never too old. And there are tons of things that we can all do to pursue our dreams. So without further ado, let's jump in and talk to Paul. Hi, Paul. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Oh, my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
I am so excited to have you, and I can't wait to dive into your inspiring story. So we typically like to start back at the beginning, and I know that you got your bachelor's in engineering, industrial engineering, and then you went on to get a PhD. So why don't you give us a little bit of a background of what your career before you took this jump into entrepreneurship looked like?
I did study engineering, although I wasn't really passionate about it. I'm not sure what I was passionate about, as a 19-year-old. But when I finished my studies, my undergrad studies, I really wasn't keen on going into the engineering workforce, I guess. I actually found some what people nowadays would have called underachiever jobs. I mean, jobs that certainly didn't require my engineering background, but I found them to be rather fascinating, nevertheless, because I was around a whole different group of people than engineers.
Right.
I worked for a news agency and not doing anything, dramatically important, but, I had the luxury. I was a young guy and I was just kind of experimenting around with things other than engineering. After a few years of this, I did become a little uncomfortable about where I was headed or whether I was headed anywhere. I've always loved mathematics, and I enrolled in grad school to study mathematics. And that was a long and arduous grind, as anyone who's been through that can tell you. And by the time I came out the other end, I didn't lose my love for mathematics, but the only outlet that I envisioned for myself was an academic career. And that was not an attractive option for me. I'd seen enough of academia over the previous 7 years or so. That didn't hold out much attraction for me. So here I am with an advanced degree, getting older by the minute and wondering what I'm going to do with my life. And I was invited to visit an uncle who had his own manufacturing business and was in poor health. I went to spend some time with him, mostly as a nephew to an uncle.
Right.
But I walked away from the visit with an offer to work for him because he could no longer manage things on his own. Frankly, I jumped at it. It seemed like a good choice at the time, and I certainly didn't have any other choices. So I went to work for him. Turned out to be quite a disaster. He was much better as an uncle than he was as a boss. We didn't get along very well, which was kind of sad because we'd always been very close. But I loved what I was doing, though. I did come away with that. I loved being in the manufacturing side of things. When his health really failed and the business was going to be sold, I took a job with one of our clients. And that was the beginning of my manufacturing career. And it was in the consumer products industry.
Did you feel when you were going into that, and I think it happens so often for us where just things kind of, especially when we're either in college or coming out of college or, graduate school, where just by happenstance, we end up, in one job and it leads to another and we sort of kind of fumble our way into whatever our career ends up being. Did you have any thoughts at the time? I just spent, 6-7 years, whatever it was, getting a PhD in math. And even though you didn't want to be in academia, that so many times we get stuck in, well, I can't, quote unquote, waste this degree. I have to go and find something that fits this.
No, I struggled with it, but not to the extent that it made choices for me.
Right.
I just felt that I had mistaken an interest for a career or a passion for a career. And then I thought, well, what's wrong with having a career around something you're passionate about? Well, there is nothing wrong with it, but the only careers that I saw available to me were in academia, in that corporate structure, so to speak. And I knew it wasn't for me. I just knew it wasn't for me. I had kind of an inside look. I mean, as a graduate student, you get kind of a better look at what's going on internally than you do as an undergrad.
Right.
And I knew it wasn't for me.
Right.
I just knew it. It wasn't the kind of lifestyle I wanted. And I did have an engineering degree. I had, kind of an aptitude in that area to a certain extent. And I really took to the world of manufacturing and actually making something.
Right.
I really liked that. So that began my manufacturing career in the consumer products industry. I stayed with that for another 40 years, basically. The only changes I made were who was my employer. I worked for very large companies and some very small companies, but not too many, really. I didn't change jobs all that often.
Right.
I wasn't from the generation that changed jobs every couple of years. So.
Right. That's incredible, though. So you were in this industry for 40 years. And throughout that time, did you ever have any inklings of wanting to start your own thing or jumping
Every day. Honestly, I was involved in the world of manufacturing that everyone calls outsourcing today. So my responsibilities were working with vendors all over the world or all over the country who were under contract to my company or the company I worked for. They are by their very nature entrepreneurs, most of these folks. So today they're big businesses too. When I was involved in it, these vendors were, family businesses. They were like the uncle that I worked for. They were like that very same business. And some of them were as crazy as he was too. But I liked being around them. They were charismatic. They were dynamic. They were interesting. Frankly, they were far more fascinating than my corporate colleagues. I mean, there wasn't even a comparison that could be made. And I enjoyed being around them. And I often wondered what it would be like for me to start my own business, like them. And I had lots of ideas too. But they never seemed to survive the next day or the next week.
Yeah, I was going to say, what stopped it? Was it just general?
They just
fear?
didn't. Yeah, I just as I slept on them, I'd wake up the next day or the day after and say, no, that's just not
Right.
When I finally launched Pulp Works many years later, it did seem like a good idea the next day, the next week, the next year. Today, it still seems like a good idea.
Well, we're going to get into that. So why don't you tell us, what was the impetus that you started kind of maybe thinking about entrepreneurship more seriously?
Well, I got fired. I got fired as a 64-year-old person from my last employer.
Yeah.
They had some struggles post-recession. And although I can't really lay my dismissal at the door of the economy, one of the changes that was made during the recession was a new CEO. The old CEO who had hired me was a friend and a remarkable man. And I just never took a liking to the new person.
Right.
And he was astute enough to notice that. So I guess my name, I was marked for the exit door, I'm sure. But it was my dismissal that really got me going, because I didn't have something to jump into right away. I did some consulting for a few years, and I wasn't really happy with it because I thought, not to sound maudlin, but I thought, this is my final act. I'm 66 now, and here I am consulting something I did 20 years ago, and I know that's okay. It's an income, but I want to do something special. It's my last chance.
Absolutely. And going back really quickly to when you got laid off, was it something that, I know you were saying that maybe you saw the writing on the wall because you didn't get along with the CEO, but I'm just wondering, so many of us stay in these quote unquote like secure jobs because we think like that's what we have to do. And the same thing that happened to you actually happened to my mother when she was 60 and she was laid off from a job that she had been at for 20 years. And she was completely like blindsided though. She had like no idea that it was going to happen. And I remember going through that with her. And I wondered, which is what your experience is that, were you blindsided at all? Were you kind of shocked in this way of like, what do I do as a 64-year-old? Now, were you thinking you had to get another job, or can you tell us a little bit of what you went through?
Sure. Because I guess my story I know my story is commonplace, because from the reaction and the messages and responses that I've gotten to my TED Talk when I do talk about this, I hear from literally thousands of people all over the world who've had the same story. I'm 63. I just went through what you went through, so I hear it. I still get those messages almost every day. I'm embarrassed to say that I was blindsided. I should not have been. When I think about it, it was painfully obvious that we hide our head in the sand or something. So I was blindsided. But I was not devastated by it. In fact, I'll tell you why I know I wasn't devastated by it. Well, first of all, I didn't sink into a depression or anything like that. Actually, my exit interview, which did come as a surprise. Somebody said, "Hey, can you jump into a conference room with us? We just want to cover a few things." Well, can we do it on Monday? I'm on my way out for the weekend. No, we'd really rather you did it now.
Oh, God. Yay.
And I said, "Oh, okay. All right." So I went in and, I could tell from the funereal look on everyone's face. And eventually, as we say, the suits left the room. And it was me and the HR director, who's a lovely, lovely woman. I could tell she was so uncomfortable. And she looks up at me and she says, "Paul, you're eating an apple." And I said, "Well, I'm hungry. I was on my way home." And she said, "Yeah, but this is your exit interview and you're eating an apple." I said, "Well, I'm hungry." She said, "I think you're going to be okay, Paul." I said, "Of course I'm going to be okay." It was the proverbial blessing in disguise. It really was.
Well, what a great way to look at it, though.
I did not want another job. First of all, I landed that job when I was 60, and I thought that was remarkable, that they would hire a 60-year-old guy.
Right.
But that's why I was so in love with the CEO. Age meant nothing to him. In fact, he said something that really stays with me today and really should be on the minds of everyone who's hiring and looking for a job at that age. And what he said was, in fact, during my interview for the job, we covered everything except we never talked about my age, which I thought was probably, against some HR regulation and all. But I said to him, there's an elephant in this room that we haven't discussed. And he said, what is that? And I said, my age. He said, no, what's the issue? I said, well, I'm 60. And he said, Paul, let me ask you this. Are you going to give me 3 or 4 years of your time? Can you tell me that, honestly look at me and say, I'm going to give you 3 or 4 years at the very least? I said, yeah, I'm planning to ride into the sunset on this job. And he said, well, let me tell you something. We're a young company. We have a young staff. You've seen them. Most of those people are not going to give me 2 years or 3. They're all going to be gone 2, 3 years, and it's going to keep turning over that way. So why shouldn't I get someone with 35 years of experience who's going to give me 3 years rather than somebody with 35 months of experience? And I said, well, you put it that way, I seem like a pretty good catch. And he said, you are a good catch.
You're like, I want to raise now.
But isn't that true now?
Totally. Absolutely.
And when you just mentioned before that security, I remember you kind of hesitated on the word. There is no job security. It's an absurd concept. Yeah. I have more security as an entrepreneur. I know I'm not going to be fired.
Right. But that's really what I want to get across, actually, is that I think we have just been programmed to think that certain things are risky. And it's usually because people don't maybe understand it. I think it's funny that people that like fear entrepreneurship have never really tried it. And I know there's, statistics about businesses that fail and all this stuff. And so we get so scared. And I think a lot of times we have this false sense of security. We think that, oh, if I have this job, it just doesn't work the way it used to. You're not working for 30 years and then you're going to get a pension. And it's just not like that. And what you're saying, a couple of things. One, it was incredibly insightful for that CEO to understand that. And I always think it's so silly that there is even this ageism thing, because why wouldn't you want someone that has experience, that has the knowledge? But beyond that, it's like people are working so much longer now. People aren't retiring at 65. A lot of people can't retire at 65. And I think that people don't realize, they think they're going to stay at these jobs. And then when they get laid off, and when you're saying you're hearing from thousands of people, I've seen it in just my own family. I've had uncles, aunts, my mom, where it just so happens at 60, 62, 65. It was great that you had that view kind of coming out and you were calm. But I think a lot of people really, like you were saying, kind of go into a depression because they're so blindsided and they're left with like, what do I do now? It's like this panic of I'm not going to get hired. And a lot of people still may not really want to do entrepreneurship or not be able to do consulting or whatever it is, depending on their field. I really want people to plan for that a little more, beyond just planning for retirement. It's like, how long do you need to be making an income for? And like, what happens if you get laid off? What happens if that job is no longer there?
Exactly. And it's good to hear you say that. And yeah, it's just not that way anymore. Yeah. It hasn't been that way for quite a while.
Absolutely.
Frankly. And people that still hold on to that are really, really mistaken. They're really mistaken. And what's really sad is I love what I'm doing now. I absolutely love it. And it's not all that different from what I did as an employee. It really isn't, except for one big difference. It's my business now. It's but the work that I do, the technical features of it, the network in which I move around, it's not all that different. But what a difference, though.
Yeah.
I often describe the difference, the way I feel about it when people ask, is that when I was an employee, especially going back into the late 80s or the 90s, with the advent of email and how that changed everything, I used to just reluctantly open my mailbox in the morning, because I knew there was going to be a ton of mail in it, and I'd have to answer all those messages, and half of them were nonsensical. I used to just pray for an empty inbox. And now I can't wait to open my inbox. And the more messages, the better. I know half of them are garbage and everything, but there's some pearls in there too every day. And I just love opening my inbox in the morning.
It's so funny how things shift when you're doing things that you love.
It's
I love
amazing.
That. So tell us a little bit about how this happened. Like, so you're consulting, and when do you start getting an idea or this inkling of what PulpWorks is? And why don't you explain what your company does?
I'm consulting and I'm looking around furiously for ideas and things that, can grow into a business. And so I'm all ears and all eyes as far as opportunities are concerned. And an old friend reached out to me. He had a business in Asia, actually, and he said, business is starting to pick up. He said, but I don't have any client base in North America. Why don't you be my North American sales rep? And he said, basically, you could have the whole continent is your oyster. And I said, that's a lovely offer and everything, but I'm not a very good salesman. I mean, I've never been in sales. Frankly, I've always disliked. I've disliked sales, and half the salesmen that called on me, I've disliked salespeople. I said, no, not. It just doesn't feel like a good fit. But thank you. And then I kind of chewed on that for a while, and he was involved in a business similar to what I do today, but his manufacturing was in Asia. And I said, how about this? What if I start a business similar to yours, except I don't do any manufacturing? I let you do my manufacturing for me. And he said, that's fine. He said, that's in essence kind of the same thing. You're still bringing me business. I said, well, but the difference is it would be my company, and you would just be outsourcing my manufacturing for me. And he said, that's fine. That sounds like a nice win-win. And so that's what we did. We started that way. He was my manufacturer. As my business grew, I kind of outgrew him, actually, because he had a rather small and narrow capability. But he put me in touch with other people, and I found other partners over the years. And today we have 6 partners around the world, but really only 1 or 2 at best that are our primary partners. And that original gentleman is not even in the network anymore, quite frankly.
So what does the company do?
We design and manufacture packaging from waste materials. And when I say waste, I should be more specific. It's cellulosic waste, anything that's got the cellulose fiber in it, cartons, and all manner of agricultural waste, with cellulosic fiber. So we use sugarcane waste and bamboo waste and wheat straw. And these fibers create a pulp, and then the pulp is molded into a package. So you know exactly the kind of packaging that we do because you have one in your refrigerator right now, the egg carton.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, we don't make egg cartons. That's a whole industry unto itself. But that's the kind of packaging that we do. However, I must not to minimize the egg carton business, but the egg carton is kind of the most primitive form of that kind of packaging.
Right.
It's pretty basic, but it serves the purpose and does a great job. So our packaging is a little more premium because we can't compete at the egg carton level. Those are big companies with multi-million dollar facilities and stuff. So we do more premium packaging, shorter production runs, more premium looking packaging for cosmetics and electronics and some food items and then a whole bunch of outliers too. I mean, probably more outliers than inliers. But the one thing that all of our packaging has in common is it's either recyclable or compostable or biodegradable. So none of it is going to leave its mark on our planet.
That's so wonderful. And it's so needed right now. And I can imagine that it's such a fulfilling thing to be working on.
It is. But it's still challenging because our competition is good old plastic, and it's been around for 60 years, and it's cheap and it's easy, and people are addicted to their plastic.
Right.
Manufacturers are addicted to it, and the public is addicted to it too. So we have a steep hill to climb, but it keeps getting easier, little, and I do mean little by little.
There does seem to be a bit of a sea change. Hopefully it'll happen much faster than it's at the rate that it's going. But
I think so. I'm really encouraged by an event of the past, maybe even the past year, and which I think is still quite amazing given how slow the industry is. The paper straw has taken off like a rocket ship.
Yes.
I don't know what did it, but whoever was behind that, God bless you.
Yeah, absolutely.
And we're trying to do the same thing for the plastic lid on the coffee cup. And we're not, I mean, it's not our original idea, but we make those, and we have a good looking, inexpensive replacement. It's inexpensive, but it's still more than that plastic lid.
Right.
And there's the rub. It's, but that's a really sad story because we're talking about a penny or two difference.
Right.
A penny or two difference.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Yes, I know that makes, when you're buying billions of them, as you will, if you're Starbucks or somebody, yes, I understand a penny or two, translates into millions of dollars. But my God, they raise their prices.
I was going to say, you can raise your price by 2 cents and nobody's going to do anything.
And, I never saw anyone storm out of a Starbucks because their latte went up 5 cents,
If we're willing to pay $5 for a latte, we're willing to pay $5.02.
Exactly. So I'm encouraged. And I hope it catches on even half the way the paper straw has. I'll be a very happy camper.
Yeah, I love that. And I love, the mission, everything that you guys are doing. But just going back to when you were starting this, I want to know, like at the time you were saying like you were 66.
Yes.
Did you ever start thinking because I think what most people do is start stopping themselves before they even get started. And it's, I'm too old to start this. Who am I to think I could start a business? Like all of these fears that we all have. We all think we're all, this imposter syndrome. And did you wrestle with a lot of that?
Yeah. I'm the king of imposter syndromes. I mean, that's kind of one of my favorite phrases too. I mean, I was standing, you're familiar with the TED Talks, right?
Yes.
I was standing on the TED stage on that big red circle and still expecting someone to come out with a hook and pull me off and say, this guy is not our next speaker. Yes, I suffer from that quite severely. But I didn't feel, I wasn't going to get another job. I wasn't going to try to look for it. I didn't want one. I didn't want another boss. Mm-hmm. The whole idea turned me off. But I needed to earn. We live in Northern California.
Yeah.
I haven't been the most astute investor. And yes, we needed the income. There's no question about it.
But even that stops people, actually. Like, I'm glad you brought that up because I think again, going back to this fear of like risk, I think a lot of people, you clearly were very clear on the fact that you don't want a job. But I think even a lot of people that feel that way just swallow it and say like, if I start a business, I might not make an income, like a good income or whatever it might be, or I might not be able to raise capital or get anything for the next year or 2 years. And I can't risk that. So I'm just going to suck it up. And even though I hate this and I don't want to go work for someone else, I'm going to do it. So like, what do you think it was about you that you decided like at the end of the day, it is a risk? I think everything is a risk, but like it was a risk to say, I'm going to try my hand at entrepreneurship at 66. So what do you think like helped you push past that imposter syndrome and that fear?
Well, I think my reasoning was, I believe it today. I think that's what my reasoning was at the time, is that if I'm going to find another job, it's going to be darn hard. And if it's not hard, it's not going to be a very good job. Mm-hmm. If I can just land another job tomorrow, it's either going to be the greatest stroke of good luck or, it's going to be a Walmart greeter. There's no job that I'm going to get tomorrow that's going to duplicate the kind of work I've been doing. They say it takes a long time to land a special job, especially the higher up you go, the more money you're making. You don't just roll over into a new job.
Right.
And I thought, I could spend the next year looking for that job, that special job, when at the end of that year, I could have a good head start on a business. There did not seem to be a choice. That it was clearly in favor of doing, and maybe I talked myself into it or I made the cards come out that way, but I'm glad I did. So
am I. And I think that it's something that more people really need to, it's a great outlook and I wish more people had it. And I know you talked about it. So I will link up to your TED Talk. If people haven't listened, they absolutely should. It's a wonderful talk. And
Thank you.
You're welcome. And in it, you talk about the high rate of success for business and entrepreneurship for older entrepreneurs.
Right.
And I really wish people knew this, that we like to tout the 30 under 30s and we like to, those make for good headlines. The 23-year-old app developer that makes a, $50 million app or whatever it is.
Right.
But the reality is that for good reason, I think the younger people that start these like startups and stuff tend to have a higher fail rate. And I think when we're talking about, somebody with experience and who has, more maturity and understanding of business tends to have a much higher rate of success. And so why is it that we don't see more older people jumping into entrepreneurship? And I'd love your thoughts on that.
Yes, I'm not surprised about the higher. I mean, I learned that as I was researching my TED Talk, but I'm not surprised by it because I don't think we, older entrepreneurs, I don't think we feel like we have the luxury of failing, getting up, failing, getting up. We don't have that luxury. We don't have that many more failures left in us. So I think maybe we make safer choices, or maybe we do more research. I don't know what it is, but we definitely succeed more readily. I think, the number is like 70%, as I mentioned in my talk, versus 28% for young entrepreneurs, which makes sense to me too, because, they fail and get up and try, they pivot into something else. And I'd do that too if I was 28,
Right.
Yeah, the success rate is astounding. And I hope that becomes more of a well-known fact. In fact, as you know from my talk, my closing line is, let's make 70 over 70 as commonplace as 30 under 30.
I love that.
I know. I just don't think it's going to become as commonplace, but let's try.
Yeah. No, I agree with you. And it's funny. My parents, my mom too, after she got laid off, same thing happened. Actually, what you were saying, I think for a while she did. You're right. For like a year, tried to find a job and it just wasn't doing it. And then started a business and it's become the most incredible, successessmal, wonderful business. And it has changed her life and her outlook. And it's
That's fantastic.
Yeah, it is. It's great. It's so great. And
may I ask you, is it related to the work that she did, or is it a complete,
so it's completely different. And I think it's more fulfilling, but her work. So my mother was VP of accounting at the old company that she was at. So she still does the accounting for this company. So she does the books for it, but it's a school for severely autistic children. And she went into the partnership. My sister has her degrees in child development psychology and has run preschools for like 20 years. And so they went into business together and they opened this school. And again, but I think with what you are saying too about this is it was a cause that she was very passionate about. And so the fulfillment that comes from that and waking up and doing something that is yours and that you really feel such a passion for is such a blessing. And it was the same for my mother, that like my mom would have never started her own business if she hadn't gotten that gentle nudge out of there, And so it was, I always tell her that she should write a thank you card to her old boss for firing her because he did her the biggest favor he could have, anybody could have ever done. And so I do hope, I would ask you the same thing though. Like if you hadn't gotten laid off, do you think that you ever would have started a business?
Honestly, no, I don't think I would have done it. I don't think I would have done it. No.
Yeah. And that's the question is how do we get people that are maybe not getting that nudge, but have something in them and have that dream of starting something, but, can't get themselves to push out of that comfort zone. I mean, I think that's my question with this whole podcast.
I wasn't enjoying my work, but I wasn't thoroughly and utterly miserable because, and I think this is true for a lot of people, is my colleagues. I really enjoyed my colleagues. That made it bearable. And so bearable enough to keep doing, I guess. So I needed that, as you called it, that gentle nudge also. And, I wonder if your mom would agree with me. When I say that what I'm doing today is not tremendously different than what I did for the past 40 years, except that it's my own business, my contention is, and I say this, I hope I'm accurate, and your mom would be able to answer that quickly, is that I think, you and let's take accounting. You could work in accounting, whether you're just a staff accountant or VP of accounting like your mom, but you could work in accounting and be utterly miserable with your situation and then turn around and have your own accounting business where you're basically doing the same thing that you did and just love getting up and going to work every day. And I your mom would agree with me, I'm sure, wouldn't she?
I'm sure. Oh, absolutely. I mean, I can say that even from my own experience. I used to be a lawyer before I quit and started my own business. And just from other lawyers, and I get it because a lot of times people, it's not a negative reaction to the podcast, but I think a lot of times people want to prove to me that they're happy in their job, that they don't want to quit. And I think a lot of times lawyers, because, I talk to a lot of lawyers on this podcast that have left, and I was a lawyer that left. And I think people want to show me that they have a great situation. And I don't doubt that. I'm not saying that no lawyer can be happy or whatever, and I think that it is so situational. And I always say there was aspects of the jobs that I loved. And you're right. Maybe if I had just left and started my own firm, maybe I would have still been happy. I was miserable in the environments that I was in and the type of work that it was. Yeah. And so I have no doubt that there is such a different feeling. It's just the motivation behind it, right? I think a lot of times you could be doing the same thing, but when it's for yourself and you're not answering to anybody and you get to make the rules, there's a different level of satisfaction and fulfillment. And the same work, it could be the same work. It's just that you don't have to ask somebody to take the day off to go to the doctor. It's that kind of stuff makes it much, I don't know, it makes it more fun to me, but.
Yes. And watching the checks come in with your name on it also makes it. Right. I was on a panel in New York a couple of years ago. It was kind of like a best practices panel, and some of the other panel members here's where my impostering came in. Right. The fellow next to me was an attorney, but he had his own record label in Florida or something, and with artists who you and I have heard of.
Oh, wow.
So he was pretty impressive, and questions were coming out of the audience and everything, and he kind of leaned over and whispered to me, "I just love writing invoices." And I thought, he probably doesn't write invoices, right, of course. Right. He has a whole accounting department, but I knew what he meant. Right. It just feels good. I earned this money on my own.
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Well, that's incredible. Can you tell us a little bit about what SORT is all about? Because I know you started something else.
Yes, and just this year, and as if I wasn't busy.
I was going to say, when is retirement coming up? You're starting too many things.
Well, I don't play golf, and my wife is just as busy as I am, with things that she does, although she is retired, so to speak. Mm-hmm. I mean, retired from a steady paycheck, right. I guess. Our families are grown, and yeah, I like what I'm doing. So I would ordinarily not have a chance to talk to you.
Right. Right.
I mean, our paths probably would not have crossed unless you were launching, a new mascara line that you wanted packaging for. So here I have an opportunity to talk to, a wonderful person like yourself, and these are how my days go. Right. So what's not to like about that?
I agree.
SORT is kind of a related area because PulpWorks is all about replacing plastic and the horrible plastic pollution that's on our planet. Mm-hmm. And SORT is more under that same gigantic plastic pollution umbrella, but it's more about waste management and literally about sorting our waste. And we have trouble sorting our waste. And that's why China stopped taking our waste because we were sending them contaminated waste. And SORT is all about eliminating contamination from our waste stream. And we have, we are developing software that will help in doing so. There's already software and there's robotics involved in it. Ours is more focused on the customer, the household, the business, the person or company that creates trash that goes out to the curb and is picked up every Tuesday. We're more focused on that end of the chain because that's where it all begins.
Yeah.
And we want those folks, meaning you and I and the business down the block and the factory around the corner, we want them to do a better job of what they put out in the garbage. So garbage companies are thrilled with what we have in mind because they get a better class of garbage when it's sorted better. They get better garbage. Right. And then they can sort it better themselves. And they can hopefully reopen some of those transaction chains that have been lost to them, although I'm not sure China's ever going to take us back. But waste does have value.
Right.
And by contaminating it, taking all of the value out of it. So we have software and a hardware solution to better sorting of plastic or any waste, really. But our focus is on plastic. And we do it through, a smartphone app or an actual device, something like a little mini camera of sorts, which would be mounted on your waste receptacle, wherever that happened to be. The power behind that is through computer vision and artificial intelligence. These devices are all connected through the Internet of Things, and they can be adapted to different situations and feedback to the consumer, feedback to the waste management company, feedback to other people. Wow. And throughout all this, we'll be collecting an enormous amount of data through our computer vision. All of everything that you'll be tossing in that recycling bin, we're going to be photographing it. So there's an enormous amount of data that's going to be collected, and that'll be valuable to government agencies and others and stuff. So we think we have something pretty cool. Yeah. But we still have a long way to go. There's 4 of us involved, 2 software engineers and myself and another person. And we're all otherwise engaged, making a living. Right. So it's been slow going, but we've had enough little glimmers of victory that we think there's a real good potential for this.
That sounds amazing. And it clearly is something that we need. And it's also just incredible that, like I said, you have your full-time business and then you're starting other ventures as well. So to cap this off, what would be some advice maybe that you have for somebody that was in your position at 64 and maybe in a job that they don't love, the CEO, and they have the eye on maybe retirement in 10 years or something, but they don't know what they want to do. Any parting words?
Well, they don't know what they want to. I think people do know. They know something about what they'd like to do. It could be, they might dismiss it as a fantasy or something. I think if you really press them, they could tell you what they'd love to be doing or something. And that might not be something they could just transition into successfully overnight. But I think it would open a conversation. And then that conversation might lead to something they could transition into rather quickly. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
But I think you're taking somebody who's been punching a clock, so to speak, for 40 years. Right. They're not going to be able to answer you immediately with, well, geez, if I had it my way tomorrow, I would start a small parcel delivery service. They don't think that way. Right. But I think you could coax it out of them. But I think it would take a really deep and sincere conversation to coax that out of them because it's buried so deep. My advice would be, it is buried deep. If you're unhappy and you don't have ideas about what you'd like to do, it's in there. It's right. Start thinking about it constantly, day in and day out. Start thinking about corollaries to that and tangents to that and follow those paths and see if that doesn't take you to something, a little more interesting. And keep in mind, like what you and I discussed before, even if you hate your accounting job, if you had an accounting business of your own, guaranteed you'd love being an accountant. Right. Or something about it you'd love. Right. You'd certainly love getting the checks from your clients, but don't write it off just because you hate doing it for the man. Or something attracted you to that kind of work in the first place. Maybe that's still alive and well somewhere inside you.
Yeah, that's great advice. I actually wholeheartedly agree, especially with just really following that curiosity and trying to get clear, because you're right, it's in there. It's just that we've pushed it down for so long that we don't even really know what we like anymore. So
and remember, there's a 70% chance you're going to be successful.
Yes.
Seriously.
I love that.
When you have that in mind, you say, wow, if I can just come up with something, the likelihood is it's going to work.
I love that.
Right. That's pretty cool.
That is really cool. Paul, can you tell us where people can find you if they want to see what you're up to or maybe connect?
I'm completely findable. I have no privacy whatsoever. Well, none of us do.
Right, exactly.
But yeah, I'm on Facebook and LinkedIn and Twitter and Pulp Works has a website. If you'd like to see the kind of work we do and the kind of packaging that we create, it's all one word, Pulp Works Inc. So PulpWorks .com.
Perfect.
And I'd love for people to visit the website and leave a message for me there.
Sure.
But yeah.
I will link to the website and all of your social media handles. So if people want to find you, you can just go to the show notes and reach out to him. Paul, thank you so much for joining me today. How amazing is Paul? That was one of my favorite talks. Here are my 3 takeaways. 1, it's never too late. I know that's like the tagline of this podcast, but I love showcasing stories like this to let go of any excuse you might have. Listen, if you're older, that just means that your rate of success is higher. Congratulations. 2, there is no such thing as security. We all love to think that there's this false sense of security of staying in some miserable job. But the reality of it is that a lot of people find themselves laid off later in life. And you have to think about that. Like, think about what you can control. If you're only staying because of the security, you got to find a better reason. And 3, get clear on what you want. It's buried there deep inside. You just have to figure it out. We've been taught for so long to push it down or ignore it or it's not realistic that so often we don't even know what our dreams look like. Spend some time fleshing that out because it's there. With that, I will see you guys on the next episode. Thank you so much for listening. I can't tell you how much it means to me. If you liked the podcast, please rate and review us on iTunes. It'll help other people find the show. If you want to connect or reach out, follow along on Instagram and Facebook at Lessons from a Quitter and on Twitter at Quitter Podcast. I would love to hear from you guys. And I'll see you on the next episode.